I'm Lucas Merriweather Buford.
I'm Phineas Cromwell.
And I'm Abigail Beatrice Cormack, and we are the citizens of Antiford.
Yep. And we're bringing you a DIY steampunk. It's a DIY is a very large part of the steampunk movement.
Yeah, it's a maker culture.
Right.
In great part.
So okay. So
why should you DIY besides the fact that steampunk is a very maker culture in general, but why do you particularly choose to DIY? So there's several pros to DIYing. Something that you make yourself is custom to you. So if you are, like everybody has different body shapes and whatnot, so if you make it yourself or for someone that you're friends with or family or whatnot, it will be custom to them and it'll fit like a custom garment or custom prop. It's also unique because making things by hand gives you a sort of a one-up that like no one else is going to have the same prop or same costume as you.
One of the things that I really like about it is learning new things, developing skills, and one thing in the steampunk community, in particular, that I've noticed is that steampunks are always willing to help. If you don't know how to do something, like I do soldering and electrical work, and I do some leather work, but I know people who don't know how to do that kind of stuff. They know how to do other things. They know how to sew patterns and do that kind of stuff. And we get to exchange and to teach each other how to do those kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's been many times you'll see a gas mask on the table over here that Megan and Justin made for me. But I added a few bits and bobs, some gears here and there, the little air filter. So they did the bits I didn't know, and then I could kind of customize a little more. And yeah, also to just point out the unique part, like there are plans on the internet for this thing. There are YouTube videos for people who've made mechanical hands, but I have almost never seen people make it the same exact way. It's always different proportions, different materials.
In fact, you know some Emperor Justinian of the Red Fork Empire. He used the same exact instructions, and they have two completely different styles of hand, because it ends up incorporating a lot of your personal artwork into it and your aesthetic and what you like.
Right, and like, yeah, sure, well, this isn't something that you're going to buy from the store. A vest or a hat or something like that is something you can make that'll just be super unique to you. And you don't have to worry about, well, what if somebody else is completely copying everything I'm doing? Well, that's not going to happen.
And another pro that sort of goes along the line of learning a new skill in steampunk, so coming from a cosplaying background, and there's certain cosplay secrets. There aren't really any secrets in steampunk. If you have trouble with something, or you want to learn a new skill, or you find a prop that somebody has made really interesting, more than likely, like probably 98% of the time, if you go up, they'll teach you how to do it. That this community is very open, and we want to share this sort of maker culture.
And the last one on this list can and can't be true, depending. It's okay. It's on the cons list. Yep. Yeah. It's on the cons list too. Is that it can be a money saver. You can save a lot of money by doing these things yourself, especially if you're thrifting the materials or you're going to flea markets, yard sales to get the base materials that you're using. On the other hand, if you, say, go to a leather store and you're buying all of your own leather can be very expensive to start with.
Yep.
Especially with all of the tools, all of the hardware, to get started, it can be very expensive. But once you've learned that skill, you can tear apart other things. You find a leather jacket for $5 at a flea market, and now you've got a leather jacket that you can tear apart, and you can use that garment leather for whatever you want.
Yeah.
Another con is that making stuff by hand takes a long time, which is sort of why steampunk props and like all the wonderful vendors, why things are priced the way that they are. Doing stuff by hand takes a lot of time, and time is worth money. And like obviously they should be paid for their time and resources and knowledge.
And not only that, but it actually takes a long time to develop the skills to the point. When I first started with my leather stuff, I mean, I have an example of the first bracer that I did, and I have, I don't actually have an example of the first rifle that I made, but it wasn't good. It wasn't good enough to bring. It's actually falling apart because I decided to make it out of cardboard, and the paint is sloughing off of it because it was a learning experience. So it can take a lot of time. I mean, we've been doing this for 6 years now, and I'm still trying to develop the skills that it takes to do what I want to do.
Yeah.
So.
Also, just I pointed this out. Crafting can be messy.
Our apartment is a nightmare.
Yeah, if you catch the crafting bug, it definitely can creep out into the rest of your house, which may or may not be a good thing for your significant other or your roommates or your parents or whatnot.
Unless, of course, they're into that kind of crafting as well,
so,
if they understand.
So just as a warning, crafting can be messy and it can take over your life.
I just want to put an upside to the fact that if you meet someone that is wearing the exact same thing you are, it's okay to marry them no matter what.
Yeah. Okay. Do your thing. There you go. So you guys are here because you want to make steampunk props.
How many? So, of the people who are here, who has made something that they have with them?
Awesome.
Awesome.
That's what we like to see.
Excellent.
Oh,
No?
no. I was just turning the light on.
Oh, okay. Like, you made that. Awesome.
You're allowed to lie.
So,
You're probably going to need some tools if you haven't started crafting or you're looking to get into different types of crafting. So in general, we recommend at least having scissors, rulers. Your hat's in the way. I can't read.
glue guns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Craft knife. So a popular brand is X-Acto. You do not have to get the X-Acto brand. We actually found.
Oh God! We just found we do a lot of this, so we should get more blades than the 5-pack that you can get at the store.
Yeah.
So we got a 100-pack, and it cost us what, like $10? So we're not going to run it anytime soon.
Yeah. So pliers, a hammer, sandpaper. Even like if you're living in like an apartment or a house, you probably have a lot of these already, but they're very good to have.
Yeah.
So some extra general tools that you'll probably need is a self-healing mat. So these are the giant plastic mats.
Doesn't matter.
They're often seen for like quilting and at sewing stores, but they're very, very useful for basically everything else. So I cut all our leather on my self-healing mat. Any paperwork, foam work, anything like that, it's really, really good to have a self-healing mat.
And most of them do have the rulers on
Yeah,
them,
the
so
grids.
they have the grids, so you can measure things out fairly nicely.
So a rotary tool, Dremel is a very popular brand. That
You don't have to get Dremel brand, but
Yes.
we know that not getting Dremel brand, we're not pitching Dremel, but getting off
nice
brand
one.
is
Yeah.
not really the best idea when it comes to a rotary tool. They tend to die.
I was working with a very, very cheap set, and honestly, it lasted me for a long while. I was able to get by with a really cheap, like $10, $15 Dremel or $15 like rotary tool, but it takes more time to cut through things, and it's smaller, and it doesn't have as many things, and so it's fine to get. It's fine to get something small to start out,
Yep.
and as you decide you want to be more invested, to get a more expensive, a nicer tool.
And when it comes down to it, the Dremel rotary tool is still under $100 to get.
Yeah.
So it's not as far as power tools go, it's not terribly expensive.
Yeah. A palm sander is very useful. You don't have to get a palm sander, but if you're doing any sort of woodwork,
Or a handheld belt sander.
yeah, or any sort of plastic work, sanding is very important in painting. And sandpaper, like sanding by hand, takes a very long time.
Yes, it does.
So, and for larger objects that you can't sand with your Dremel, a palm sander is very useful, and they're very inexpensive. Another thing is a hacksaw. So you can use the Dremel. It just, for large objects, it takes a lot of time.
And most hacksaws are good for cutting through both wood and metal. They're metal cutting blades. So I've gone through steel pipe and then moved on to cutting wood, and it still works just as well, and then onto PVC, and we're good. Yeah. So a hacksaw is a good investment too, and they're not expensive.
Yeah.
The clamps.
So clamps, when you're gluing anything together, you have to keep it under pressure so that the curing takes. Clamps, files, power drill for cutting, shaping, putting holes in things if you're doing electronics. It really helps to have a power drill, especially since you can hook other things up to it, and it will. You can hook up the larger bits and cut like eye holes out for goggles and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So some advanced tools. Some people have shops or access to shops. Unfortunately, we don't.
Or maker spaces.
These are more expensive tools, but the larger, the more expensive the tool, the easier it makes your job. So some of these are great: table saws, drill presses, belt sanders, band saws, jigsaws, radial arm saws, like any sort of large machinery.
So you'll see on the table over there is my original mechanical hand. And when I was remaking the hand this time, I didn't have access to some tools I used to have access, and I had new tools I didn't used to have, so it changed a lot of the way how this came out. Part of the reason I actually went for the square look here, because it was a lot easier to cut out flat surfaces than when I was using a dowel rod. And the real main reason that was is just because I had access to a belt sander, so I could kind of just put the little finger pieces on the belt sander until it was flat in the direction I wanted it to be, properly flat instead of all janky. So yeah, the tools you have access to really do affect what you are able to do easily.
Some more specific tools. So we do a lot of leather work.
And a lot of steampunks do a lot of leather work.
So these are some tools that we use when we make leather stuff. You don't technically need a leather punch. You can use all sets. Leather punches are really useful because you can make a variety of hole sizes. So depending on what you're lacing it with either cord or like thread or whatnot. A speed stitcher. So this is the awl that has the needle bit in it. I recommend a speed stitcher just because it saves like half the time. Because traditionally you have 2 sets of needles that you put through each hole, and that takes a long time. A rivet setter, holding stuff together. Contact cement. This is how people, generally before we do seams in leather, we put contact cement on it and then we sew it just for an extra hold. And then leather dye or shoe polish. So we got an awesome tip from
All Geared Up, Threads of Time. They're a vending group. We were doing a lot of the dyeing with the bulk dyes that you would have to, kind of water down, and they were made for batch dyeing. And he said, don't do that. Go to Walmart and get the quick shoe polish, the dyed shoe polishes. Mm-hmm. And not only does it dye, but it also finishes because it has wax in it. So it does both at once, and you don't actually have to worry about any leaching. When you're using the heavier dyes, it'll end up getting onto your clothes after a while, and you have to worry about it leaching out of the leather.
Yeah. This is also a great tip for people who LARP or do any sort of events, that if you have a large leather piece and you run through the forest and it gets all scratched up, well, it's very easy to just pop that in your bag, and then when you're back at base camp, just put another coat of shoe polish on it, and you're brand new.
15 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know more about foam work than I do.
Okay, so you don't have to use heavy materials like leather and metal and whatnot for steampunk. There are a lot of really awesome steampunk costumes that are actually made out of foam. So when I'm talking about foam, I'm talking about like yoga mat foam, or they make like shop mats that people, so like if you've seen any sort of like Halo costumes or Iron Man, usually they're made out of foam. And there's a great site called Papakura, which is a Japanese site that you can get all sorts of different blueprints, which it's sort of like a paper folding site, but a lot of people have made foam costumes from it. So working with foam, you'll probably need a heat gun or hair dryer. This is how the foam can retain the curves. You'll need contact cement. Most people use contact cement to put their foam pieces together. PVA glue, so after you've built your foam piece, you coat it in a couple coats of PVA, because you cannot spray paint it, because it will eat the foam.
Melt.
So you want a barrier before you paint it with either spray paint or acrylics. Wood burners are very useful for foam, because you can cut out intricate things. You can sort of like draw design, like etch designs in the foam, so it can make a more leather look, or like a aged metal, like potted metal look. And plastic dip, which is optional, but I always recommend it. It's kind of expensive. It's a spray paint that you put over the PVA glue, but it's slightly stretchy, so the longer you wear it, it won't chip, which is really important with foam, because if you bump against a wall, you don't want your paint job chipping. You put all that work into it, so.
Yeah, we know a guy who, Brendan, working on his Space Marine. He's from Warhammer 40K.
Yeah.
From Warhammer 40K, he's one of our friends. He's building a full Space Marine, and I think just on the legs he used 4 cans of Plastidip, and that stuff's not cheap.
Yeah, but it's very worth it,
Right.
because you don't want to ruin your paint job.
Yeah.
You can talk about this one.
Oh. I'm the electronics guy, so I learned how to solder years ago, and it's been extremely helpful. A soldering iron is, I think it's key. It really helps maintain some of the. It's a lot easier to solder the pieces together, and they will stay together, rather than kind of wrapping the wire and using tape. It just, like, you have something knocks around a little bit, and then it doesn't work. Yeah,
Do
no.
people really do wiring without soldering?
Yep,
They have
do.
soldering putties where you. So if you're afraid of a soldering iron for whatever reason, they make putties that you dip your wires in, and you can touch them together, and it seals. It's like a resin-based, like metal impregnated putty that you can do that. It's great for quick fixes when you don't have a soldering iron on hand, but
Yeah, but
yeah.
Yep.
yeah,
there's
well, I
the
mean, it has to
conductive
be
things,
conductive for it to work. Yeah, but I mean, soldering irons you can pick up for like, I've seen them for like $5.
Yeah,
And
you
then,
can get them cheap.
Solder itself, they're not usually selling the good solder, but it doesn't really matter. They're usually selling just whatever solder, and that's usually pretty cheap too.
Yep.
So soldering irons are really cheap investment.
Yeah,
If you're doing any wiring, I can't recommend it enough.
Another good thing is a multimeter or a voltmeter. The multimeter is the better of the options. It allows you to.
It'll do
amperage. It'll do. So it'll do current. It'll do resistance, and it will do voltage. So you can balance your. I've blown out LEDs, and the LEDs were merely hooked up to a AA battery, but it's just a little bit too much, and they're not expensive, but you go through 20 of them because you're not balancing it right. The multimeter really helps with knowing how well you have it balanced.
Yeah, before you put the LED on.
Yeah. Wire cutters and strippers, particularly the wire strippers. I don't recommend using your teeth to strip wire. It's not good for your teeth, though I know a lot of electrical engineers who do that. The guy who taught me how to solder, he said, I have a gap in my teeth, my front teeth. That's perfect for 22 gauge wire.
Yeah, it's,
So
like, if you don't have, I mean, you don't have to get like a wire stripping tool. You can use scissors, although you make, I use scissors, but I make mistakes. You know, oh well,
Yeah.
I have to get more wire.
Right.
You know,
So,
you just make the little bit of cuts in the plastic. And
right, yeah. So, but adding electronics to your steampunk props or costumes, as our good emperor here says, adding lights to things is really cool. It really adds a flashiness to the props.
Best props ever.
Right.
Oh, I need
So-
lights now. Thanks. I do have that. Oh.
So, metalworking. If you decide to actually go with real materials and not foam or anything, or using plastics or anything like that, you're gonna have to have some more heavy-duty equipment. Torches, welders, an angle grinder is very helpful, especially with cutting and shaping metal.
We will all be impressed if you make a metal suit of armor with gadgets and things, but you will be crying. It will be so heavy.
Unless it's balanced, right?
Oh, sure. If it's balancing itself, sure. But there's a good reason why people use foam, more than just because it's less expensive.
So yeah. But really, and the last on this list here, metal bits. Metal cutting drill bits. Don't use wood cutting drill bits on metal. They snap almost instantly. And try to use oils when you're using the drill bits because it does help reduce the friction and the heat, and your drill bits will last longer. So, all right.
So now that you know all the tools that you need, you're going to need some materials to make your props. You can find materials literally everywhere. So you can go shopping for materials. There's specific hardware stores. A lot of steampunks like to use plumbing. I have an addiction almost to copper plumbing. It's a little bit more expensive, but it's very easy to cut and make props out of. But any sort of plumbing bits, are really cool, and they look very steampunky, and like nobody really needs to know if like it's supposed to belong in a toilet if it looks cool. You can go to big package stores. I like to go to like Walmart or Target when they have their plastic on clearance, especially at Christmas time. I buy a lot of ornaments after Christmas, and they make great like toppers. The lights on his gun actually came from Target. So all the cages and stuff, anything on clearance, you can repurpose.
They were outdoor string lights that you put up. I just ripped them all apart and.
And of course they make craft stores and hobby stores for people who like to craft. You can certainly go to those stores. Garden centers are also another great thing if you're looking for new plastic bits or metal bits or like any sort of cool shaped objects. You can definitely thrift.
Thrifting is very popular among steampunks. It's cheaper and it's reusing. A lot of steampunks tend to like the whole reuse aspect of it. Plus, you can also get older styles of clothing. I've thrifted most of my suits, and you can get suits from the 50s and 60s that look pretty good. And they're cheaper. You get them for $20. You pay to have them altered, so you have them tailored. Then they fit you, and you have a nice suit that costs a tenth of what you would have normally paid.
And of course, there's yard sales and flea markets. There's a great flea market up in Hollis, New Hampshire that we like to frequent. And you can find a lot of really cool, like antique-looking, inexpensive items to make props out of.
Even really antique.
Yeah.
Like.
So a large prop that we are currently working on is a large steampunk street lamp. And the base of it, we found one at a flea market. I passed by it, and then like remorse, because when I turned around to get it, it was already snatched up. So I actually got it off of Craigslist. It's a great resource for old stuff. It's a kerosene heater. That's the base, because it has these like cute little ornate legs on it. It's got all like the filigree and whatever on it, and we just have to kind of put a pole out of it. Or you can go to swaps. You can find a lot of really cool things, especially in a steampunk. Like if you have steampunk meetups, you bring your excess junk, and you can find something from somebody else, and they probably want something of yours. That you can get a lot of inspiration and materials that way too.
You like the illegal, potentially illegal.
So you can also get materials by potentially illegal means. I used to do this a lot in college. Check your laws on dumpster diving. It is illegal in some places. It's not illegal in other places. Certain dumpsters are illegal. Don't try to climb into a compacting dumpster. Don't do that. It's really illegal.
It's also really dangerous.
Yeah, you can get yeah, really dangerous. But you can find a lot of really cool scrap materials that way, and it's amazing what people throw out. Like I've got CDs and DVDs like still in their plastic wrapping from dumpster diving. Or if you have a dump near you, dump swap shops are a really great place. Or like scrap yards, they're a really great place because you can get stuff cheap. All the good stuff they kind of pull off to the side and try to sell anyway. You can find it on the side of the road. There's been many times that I've been walking and find hubcaps and other sort of car parts that I like to incorporate into art and props and whatnot. You can find it in the street. You can find it in the woods, especially around here. So dumps were previously not a thing in the Victorian area. So if you live in an area that has a lot of woods and old houses, if you go out behind the old houses, you can find cool like old bottles and cans and whatnot that you can make stuff out of. Or you can find stuff in your neighbor's yard, but please ask them first before you like go looting around or like taking stuff on their property.
Don't just loot your neighbors. Yeah. They don't like it.
Avoid the potentially illegal part of that.
Yeah.
Also, like old glassware, don't drink from that. Right?
No.
Don't drink from old glassware, please, because a lot of it can be toxic. Yeah.
This also goes for, so my character does a lot of chemistry stuff. Do not drink from used chemistry ware. Even if you clean it, there are potentially harmful chemicals still in the glass, in Pyrex. And yeah, don't do that.
Yeah, you will never fully clean it. Don't drink from it, please.
So, and I know a lot of people who do steampunk clothes, or they make their own clothes. So there are some basic tools. This kind of goes without saying: needle, thread, pins, scissors.
Not your
particularly
not
your paper scissors. Have separate scissors for fabric. So that the blades keep their sharpness for longer. The paper tends to be very much harder, and it'll end up dulling your blades a lot quicker. Mm-hmm. So have a separate pair for, and you can splurge on those scissors. Go for the nice, like heavy steel shears that will last a long time. You'll find that cutting through the fabric is much quicker and much cleaner.
You got a big ironing board.
Yeah, oh yeah, an ironing board. We probably already have an ironing board. I don't know many people that don't have one. But flattening out the fabrics before you actually cut and sew them.
So plus, you don't need a sewing machine to sew. It just takes a really long time, and don't really be put off by the fact that sewing machines can be expensive. Especially now, there's a lot of really, really inexpensive, great machines. The newest machine I got on sale, and I think it was like $100, and it has like all crazy different buttonhole stitches and like all these different like gadgets, and it can like embroider like letters and stuff, which is really cool. Another thing that you can do, which I highly recommend, is go thrifting for a sewing machine. A lot of the sewing machines from like the 60s, 70s, 80s are still good. Just people don't sew anymore, so they end up in thrift stores. So if you get one, take it to like a small motor like tune-up place, and it's very inexpensive to get a sewing machine tuned up. So you actually save money, and you tend to get a better sewing machine.
And if you get one of the older ones, particularly from the early 70s and in the 60s, 50s, a lot of them still have, instead of like today's, they have the plastic insides, they'll have metal metal gears, and all of their insides are metal, which actually allows you to sew through garment leather a bit easier. You can't really use a modern sewing machine that isn't built for leather on leather. You'll kill the machine. It'll tear apart the insides.
Another thing to go with it, a rotary cutter. It's fine to use scissors, but I find it very easy to make a completely straight line if you're doing like strips, especially for ruffles or hems or whatnot. Using a rotary cutter, a self-healing mat, which is great for everything. I'm a big fan of the self-healing mat, and a ruler to line up your fabric, and you get an even edge all the time. Another thing is a tailor's ham. Not a lot of people know what this is. It's basically a pillow that for like bust starts or like shoulders or whatnot. You kind of push it in your garment, and then you iron over it. So you get that seam without getting any wrinkles. They're good to have, like, just for clothing anyway. And pattern weights. So I still don't have pattern weights. I use pins, but for if you're doing stuff with garment leather or like latex or anything like that, you can't pin it because the holes will be still visible. So these are just like little weights. You can use rocks. So, yeah, socks filled with rice. Binder clips are great, or like the like hair clips. I actually used to buy these in the sewing aisle and use them in my hair. I use hair clips. So for materials, you can go shopping. There's definitely fabric stores, and then smaller fabric stores. I like to support local businesses and whatnot, and they generally have a better variety than the large fabric stores. You can also go to big package stores like Walmart generally has a fabric section. There's a lot of really cool online fabric stores or online custom fabric printers. So if you want a certain pattern on your clothes or on the things that you're making, there are companies that you can upload what you want on that fabric, print it out, and they'll mail it to you. Spoonflower is a very popular one. Yep. Yeah, that's on the next one. Yeah. Yeah, so definitely Julie Andrews. My first steampunk outfit was curtains because I didn't have to gather them or anything. I just kind of sewed them in a tube. You can also find a lot of really cool fabric at thrift stores. I found a 200-yard bolt of expensive polar fleece at a
It was a full roll. It was what, 2.5 feet across and 6 feet tall of just polar fleece, and it was $30.
Yeah.
Because we think it got delivered to the wrong store, and now it was marked discounted. So we're like, we can't pass this up.
And as Finn said before, you can definitely get donated clothes and rip them apart. I like to do this with leather jackets and whatever, like leather trenches. They're not super popular anymore, but they make great pieces for adding on collars and cuffs and whatnot. Yeah, and patterns. So if you're looking for specifically steampunk patterns, Simplicity has a huge line of steampunk outfits. Yeah, they just came.
They're actually they are guests of RuffleCon,
Yep.
An alternative fashion convention in Connecticut, and they've actually been brought in because they do fashion, but they're also doing steampunk fashion, and they've been brought into the convention. They have all of their lineups and everything, and they're introducing their new patterns. So simplicity is a really good one to go
And they're
to.
really great about feedback too. So if you want to see something from Simplicity, just send them an email because they're very interested in the steampunk community and they want to make more patterns for us. So any sort of like feedback that you have, or like if you're testing a pattern and you don't know, they have a great customer service. McCall's definitely has steampunk patterns as well, not the variety of Simplicity. Butterick, while they don't really have a lot of steampunk patterns, they have a lot of really, really awesome vintage patterns. So if you're looking to get into advanced sewing, make corsets and hoop skirts and all that, they have a great line of Victorian underthings. And more specifically steampunk, Harlots and Angels, they make a lot of corset patterns, but they make a lot of really cool men's jackets, men's vests, very alternative, like very steampunk gothic sort of stuff. And then if you're experienced with patterns, you definitely can alter vintage patterns. So in the Victorian era, women got patterns in magazines, and you can still find copies of these still online or in your library, like books may have them, and you can alter them to your size.
So, goggles. Starting with some easy projects. I know it wasn't because I actually don't. I'm a steampunk that doesn't own goggles. But generally, a good first project is making a pair of goggles. A nice way of going about this is actually using the small mouth mason jar, like bands, the rings. And then just kind of attaching them with whatever you can find.
There's a pair of goggles over there that I normally keep on my hat, and it's, maybe at most $20, maybe $15 worth of stuff from one craft store at once. So it's pretty nice.
So I drew up, ignore my horrible handwriting, I did this kind of fast. So this is basically how to make goggles out of mason jar lids. So you cut a basic fabric or leather or foam piece. You cut 2 of those, you put a hole in it, you drill a hole in your mason jar lid, you cut 2 lenses. I like to use CD cases, but you can use any sort of, like if you're not going to use them, you can use CDs themselves, and it makes a really cool mirrored finish. So you glue the lens in, and then you glue the foam or leather in, and then you tie it together. Really easy. Another easy project is bracers. You can either make these out of foam, like the map one, or you can make it out of leather.
Yep. And it is like a trapezoid. It's just it's a very simple. Oh.
Yep.
Okay. It's you cut out just this very simple shape. You punch holes, and you lace it up. It's very, very straightforward. And then you can add and embellish onto it whatever you would really like, adding straps, adding little gadgets. I have a few bracers over there of various things that I've added to them. So. And shoelaces work great to tie them up.
We use shoelaces for everything.
Yeah.
So a very simple sewing pattern for the ladies is sort of a bustle, which you can either wear as a skirt itself or on top of a skirt. Or you can make this out of curtains, because you can get curtains like this and just kind of like cut it to your waist length or like waist width. So this is really, really easy. It's just a bunch of rectangles. So you hem your 4 rectangles, and then you cut one that matches your waist. And then you sew all 4 layers to that one, and then you fold it over and you put a clasp on the end. Very, very easy. But it because it's layered and whatnot, it actually looks more difficult than it is. So I have some crafting resources. So if you're looking for tutorials, Instructables is a great place. Craftster also is a crafting community. So there's a bunch of different areas that you can that it covers for crafting. They have tutorials, and they also have like feedback. So if you're like having trouble with something, you can go to Craftster and talk with them about your issues, and people will help you. DeviantArt also has a lot of really cool painting tutorials and like weathering tutorials and foam tutorials. I also say Pinterest with caution, because a lot of tutorials, they either look misleading or dead links, unfortunately. And books. Going to your library, they have a lot of books on picking up like sewing or electronics or even patterns or whatnot.
And another great resource, especially for steampunk props, is Brass Goggles.
Yeah, I think
Is it?
one? Yeah.
Oh, it's on the next one. Brass Goggles is a great forum. It's a UK forum. It's out in the United Kingdom, and they are notorious for step-by-step instructions on how to do all of their stuff. And it's not just the small props, you know, the small little. You get the little props that you do, but you can also have step-by-step instructions on how to turn your bathroom into the Nautilus. Like
Portholes and everything.
Yeah, portholes, rust dripping down from the paint, just everything just perfect to what you would picture from the book.
So there's definitely several Facebook groups. There's like Leather Crafters America or the Northeast or whatever. There's a lot of cosplay Facebook groups that and foam crafting Facebook groups and whatnot. One that I'm a member of and I like to push is the Guild of Retro Futuristic Artisans. So it's not just steampunks, it's also diesel punks and atom punks and all this other stuff. But it's really great to, if you're having an issue, you can go and ask a question, and people post like their latest build, so for like inspiration and whatnot. Which sort of goes into fellow steampunks. If you're having an issue with something, like if you don't know how to do a certain paint technique, or you find something interesting, but you don't quite know how to do it, just ask. Like most people will be more than willing to walk you through it or talk about it, and especially if they put that hard work into it, they're more than likely to explain exactly how they did it.
Right.
And if all else fails, Google. Google is a really good resource.
Yeah. So, finding inspiration, Pinterest, with caution with the instructions and tutorials, but you can find a lot of great images that you want. Like, oh, I like how that looks. I should, do something like this. It's a great place to look. Steampunk Empire is the MySpace of steampunk. A great website where they have a lot of photos. They have a forum where people talk about what they're different props that they're doing, different builds that they're doing, outfits. There's a great carousel of images on the main page where you can see different costumes and props being built by all sorts of people. Yeah.
So obviously a big source of inspiration is media, but so like movies and books and whatnot, and it doesn't have to be steampunk. There's a lot of cosplay that is so-and-so character steampunked, and that's awesome, and we love to see that because it takes a lot of work to actually go and steampunk a full character. And another thing is playing with the own materials that you own. And so what I like to do is I sort of organize my crafting junk in like certain totes, like Tupperware totes. That I have a Tupperware tote for random plastic bits, like it has bottle caps and bottles and plastic ornaments and like baby doll legs and like all this other stuff, like random stuff. And then I have a metal bin and a glass bin. That when I'm having a hard time trying to figure out how do you do the rifle, or like how do I add I recently redid our like booth like sign and whatnot, and I got these really cool lamps, and I was like, yeah, we're gonna put LEDs in them, but they look kind of plain, and I kind of like rooted around and I picked some stuff out and I laid it out and I was trying to figure out, and I ended up using ornaments on the top so they look like what's the Russian cathedral? Not a cathedral.
Like
turnip heads.
Like the Kremlin?
Kremlin, yes. So
yeah,
it looks like the Kremlin sort of on top. And just playing with your own materials, because you already have it, might as well use it.
Yeah, otherwise it's just taking up space.
Yeah.
And like we said earlier, it can get messy and cluttered, and you end up running out of space, and then you have roommates get angry at you, and so I think that about covers it.
Yeah. So I guess kind of one of the things I want to just reiterate and just mention is like a lot of this is a lot easier when you have friends and you all have your expertises and you're all learning different things because you're all interested in different things. It's way easier when you kind of share and go back and forth, and they make something for you, you make something for them, and you both kind of adapt it to your own stuff. And it's just a long it depends on if you want to do this for a while or not, but there's no rush. You don't need to get everything done super right away. You can have long projects where you've been like, okay, I've been working on this for a few years. I should actually finish this at some point. And then you'll have a mad month of super productivity. So it's just one of those things where if you kind of play the long game, it's a lot nicer. And you're just like, okay, cool, awesome, I'll finish this project. I have a bunch of unfinished projects, which you kind of have to have the room for it, which I have a nice basement, yay. But, it's one of those things where you don't have to finish everything all the time. You can kind of start a few projects, see which ones you actually want to finish, and have some friends help you.
Yeah, and also a good thing to know is crafting ability. So everybody starts somewhere. So it's kind of hard to compare yourself to people who have been crafting for like 30 years, and just don't get discouraged, because there's a lot of I find it cool that it's your first project, you make something out of leather and it's not quite as you want it, but you went through and finished it. And that takes a lot of effort, and there's been a lot of projects that I've done myself, even though I've been crafting for 15 years, that they don't come out perfect every time, but you should be proud that you actually took the time and the materials and the effort to actually make that thing. And it's important to remember that even though it may not look as great as something else, it's something that you made, and that's really special.
And and share the things you make with everybody. Talk about these things. We say that steampunks are open, and it's kind of an open conversation. We always want to talk about what we're building. Actively do that, because it's better to be super open about, oh yeah, this is how I made this and this is my process, because then some people will go, oh, have you tried this material? Have you tried that thing? Oh, yeah, like they were talking about using the shoe polish for leather dye. We would have never found that out otherwise. I've had many people suggest different thread materials for this, and I've tried a bunch of them. Some of them worked out, some of them didn't, but I was really glad I talked to people about it, because they totally gave me a ton of ideas about what to try. So being open about your props and talking about it and being excited to show people helps you as much as it makes everyone else excited.
So that's pretty much all we have. Are there any questions, thoughts?
Anybody working on anything?
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yes. For my persona, I'm a mad scientist. And
Very popular choice.
Working on
They're awesome.
a lab coat that has to, for a LARP that I'm in, has to be armor grade. And so I'm trying to do a rib cage where you can hang potion bottles off of the ribs and pull them off and drink them, and ideally throw them at people.
What are you going to be using for the ribs?
Leather. I'm going to be using
Okay.
leather, and like a rib design that'll be stitched on, or bolted on two parts of a harder piece of leather, and then Velcro for the potion bottles.
So.
All right, well, that's our spiel.
Yeah,
Please feel free to take a look at all of the gadgets we've brought with us today.
Yeah, and feel free, we're going to be around. You can come up and ask us questions or talk about
Anything?
what you're making or anything really. We like to talk to people.
Yeah.
Yep.
So well, thank you very much for coming.